When we go about and do too much cardio, it's actually inflammatory and it produces cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It causes systemic inflammation in the body, results in oxidative damage, and it really increases the speed of aging. That's why you can see a lot of long-distance, ultra-endurance runners who look significantly older than they really are. More wrinkles you'll see on their face. In general, chronic cardio increases appetite. We end up eventually eating more than we burn, and so we don't see the weight loss that we would expect. It also hinders muscle growth, so when we see muscle mass decrease, we actually see a decrease in our resting metabolic rate.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today we're going to discuss why cardio is not the best type of exercise for weight loss. We're going to talk about if doing too much cardio is actually keeping you fat, and if it's potentially slowing your weight loss speed. You know, when I was writing this episode, I thought how much I would have loved for my younger self to be able to listen to it. You know, I was a professional ballet dancer. For those of you listening to this who don't know my story, I was put in ballet when I was really young. I loved it, but I was not physically able to do it very well. My body just naturally wasn't great at dancing. But I pushed it. I did everything that people said I couldn't do. I succeeded. I had a fairly successful career just because I'm obstinate and I'm persistent and I'm committed. But despite that, I was injured all the time because I chronically restricted my calories. I was told I was fat countless times despite really not eating much and exercising like crazy. I remember when I was dancing with the Aspen Santa Fe Ballet, and I would either go into the gym before my 6 to 8 hour day of dancing, or I would finish that day, that really long, arduous day, by going to the gym and getting on the darned elliptical machine. I was just chained to it. I love to see the number of calories going out, and I thought if I could just burn more calories, I'm going to finally be able to achieve this optimal weight and get the rolls that I'd like to get, but it never happened that way. I was one of two dancers who you'd always find in the gym because I was always struggling with my weight. I then went on and I danced with the Richmond Ballet. And I would do the same thing. I mean, those days were so hard. I was dancing. I was doing plenty of cardio. I did not need more cardio. But I would go to the gym and I would take a freaking spin class before my 8-hour day of dancing, or I would go at the end of the day. And I remember I was so exhausted. My muscles were just so heavy and I was hungry and I was still struggling with my weight. And there were so many other things I could have done with my time. I could have lifted weights. I could have gone to a yoga class. I could have slept, actually. Sleeping probably would have given me the most benefit, or I could have eaten more because I really did need to eat more, but I was just eating the wrong things and doing too much cardio. My husband, Dr. Doug, same thing. You know, he always has struggled with his weight before I put together the PhD approach, and he has a genetic predisposition to struggle with obesity, and he thought more cardio. So after we both retired from dancing professionally, I thought, okay, I've got to do something else that expends a ton of calories, or else, oh my gosh, all this fat weight is going to pile on. I have no hope because the fat weight would pile on even when I was doing a lot of cardio. So I went into cycling. And you guys, I would ride my bike 250 miles a week. And still, even more belly fat would pile on. And I was out there with all these cyclists. I remember thinking about all of these guys that I was riding with, and I was pretty strong. Again, persistence pays off, super crazily committed to being as fast as I could on that darn bike. And there are all these cyclists who are either really lean, and I think those were the naturally lean guys, or there are these guys who are strong on the bike, but with these really big bellies. And they're like these bellies that are hard and tightly packed visceral fat, you know, that visceral fat I talk about in a lot of my episodes. And here they are riding their bikes 100 miles at a time with these big, fat, thick bellies. And actually, on one of our dearest cyclist friends, he was on his bike and he was riding and had a heart attack on the bike. He keeled over on the bike and died right then and there. So just because you do cardio does not necessarily mean that you are healthy. This guy could ride 100 miles multiple days in a row, and he had a heart attack on the bike because of this big belly. Cardio with a big belly is not good. You are better off with belly fat control and less cardio than you are doing crazy amounts of cardio and still hanging on to this big belly. Now, I'm not just talking about men here. Women are culprits as well. We always trend to go to cardio first. I was at Disneyland with my kids a few months ago, and my husband and I went in the morning before we went to the parks to go lift some weights. So I was in there in the weight section with my husband, and there were already two couples in there. The guys were in the weight section, and their ladies were on the elliptical machine. And I'm not even kidding you. Another couple came in, and they would part ways, and the guy would go to the weights, and the lady got on the spin bike. I'm like, Doug, what is happening here? 3 more couples proceeded in, and they would divide like that with all the ladies on the elliptical machines on the exterior of the gym and all of the men in there lifting weights. I was the only lady in there lifting weights. So really what I want you to think about doing is a lot less of this chronic cardio. Just stop it. Convert that chronic cardio into a 30-minute brisk walk every day, and then follow the guidelines that I'm going to show you and talk about here in the rest of this episode. I had a client who I was working with, and I always comes back to my mind when I'm thinking about this topic, and she just loved her cardio. She would go out. We were in Durango, Colorado. There were mountains and hiking and all these beautiful things that you could do, and she just wanted to do more and more cardio. And I kept telling her, you need to pull that back a little bit. So initially when she started with PhD, she was dropping about 2 to 3 pounds a week on average, and that would be my expectation for her age. And then all of a sudden it started slowing. It was 0.5, 1 pound per week. She was so frustrated. She's saying, I'm eating all the stuff you're saying, I'm doing it when you say, and I'm working out like crazy, and it's still not dropping. And I kept telling her, this chronic cardio is not serving you. Well, one day she came in and she was in this big old knee brace, and she hurt her knee, and she's like, I can't work out. I can't do cardio. I can still lift, but I can't do my cardio. And I'm just so nervous that all this weight is going to pile back on. And I'm not even teasing you here. I'm not exaggerating. The first week when she couldn't do cardio, she dropped 6 pounds. And then for the next 4 weeks in a row, it was 3 pounds a week. And it just totally blew her mind and completely changed the way she went about exercising and working out. Moving forward, she really focused on resistance training, and she moved outside just because she loved it, but she didn't try to get in the cardio to burn calories. And a lot of us are that way. So I want you to understand, like I said earlier, that just because you do cardio does not mean that you're healthy. We get caught up in this calorie in and calorie out concept. We just want to see the calories burn. We see these calories dissipate into thin air, but then we don't see the results on our body and in our weight that we would expect. We look at our fitness trackers, we see all of the calories in red, meaning that we either need to eat more or that we expended more at the gym and we've got this big calorie deficit. We do, 2-a-days in the gym. We cycle for miles like I did. We run these long distances, but still we don't see the results we would expect. Or we can't maintain that high load of exercise, and when it stops, the fat piles right on. I've seen clients like this over and over again. And the reason why is because your weight loss, your optimal weight, can't be sustained through unsustainable exercise. It can't be sustained with chronic cardio. And it can't be sustained with a mindset that is obsessed around calories in and calories out. Exercise is just not a great way to lose weight, especially when you're not metabolically flexible. And what I mean by metabolically flexible is I mean that your body's not able to burn fat for fuel. And that's the way the majority of us are because of the way we've been told to eat. And I talk a lot about metabolic flexibility with Mark Sisson in the podcast and the episode that we did together. So if you're interested in this concept and want to learn more about metabolic flexibility, go check that out. But what happens when we're not metabolically flexible is that whatever our body burns in exercise, the body desires to eat back. It wants to eat it all back. So we find that we have more hunger and we have more cravings when we're exercising. I had a client who reached out to me at the beginning of the year, and he said, you know what? Dr. Ashley, I'm going to lose all this weight. I've got about 100 pounds of excess fat weight, and here's how I'm going to do it. And I said, what? Are you going to work with us at PhD Weight Loss? And he's like, no. I got this on my own. I was like, okay, well, tell me your story. Tell me your plan. He's like, okay, Dr. Ashley, here's what I'm going to do. And he says, I'm going to do whatever I need to drop this weight because I've got a young child. She's 4 years old, and I've got a baby who's 4 months old, and I've got to make a change in my health. He said he has pre-diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension. His father died about his age when he was a boy, and he just doesn't want to see that happen for himself and for his family. And that's his why and his motivation. And that's a great why. And he kept just telling me that he's going to go hard. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean to you? And he goes, well, I've already started 2-a-days. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to work out in the morning. And then when I get home from work, I'm going to work out again in the evening. And I was like, okay, I already didn't like the sound of this, as you can see by what I'm sharing with you here. And he said, well, when I go to the gym, I'm going to get on the elliptical machine and I'm just going to go hard. And then when I get home, I'm going to go for a run and I'm going to go hard again running. And, that's the last thing this fellow needed to do with 100 pounds of excess fat weight on his frame. You guys, for every pound of excess fat weight that we carry, it's 8 pounds of force pushing through the foot and the ankle. It's about 5 pounds of force pushing through the knee, and it's about 4 pounds of force pushing through the hips and off the spine. This fellow had a really large belly, and that amount of weight pulling off the spine, pushing down into the knees and the ankles, running and doing cardio in that way is the last thing this guy needed to do. In addition to doing his 2-a-days, he said he's going to follow a vegan diet. And I was just like, oh my, it took every inch of me, every ounce of me to just stay quiet. And I didn't actually. I told him my thoughts there on what I thought would allow for actual success. But, I said, you do what you're going to do. And if you find that this isn't a sustainable path for you and that going hard isn't going to do it for you, I want you to reach out to us at PhD. And he said, in addition to hold himself accountable, he was going to post stories of his workouts and his diet on his Instagram account. And I was like, okay, well, I wish you the best of success. And I thought in my mind, maybe 1 to 2 weeks, he would be able to sustain that plan. And so I just after preparing for this episode, went to his Instagram account to check it out. And there were 4 days of videos. That's it. That unsustainable plan where he wasn't eating adequate protein, not getting enough nutrition in there from a vegan diet, and then exercising really hard 2 times a day, every day. It's just unsustainable, you guys.
Hey, really quickly, if you feel you need additional support for your metabolism and blood sugar levels while dropping weight or maintaining your weight loss, I created a capsule just for that. It's called GlucoCut Plus and contains industry-leading ingredients to help burn fat, support your thyroid, and maintain lean muscle mass. Visit drashleywellness.com or click the link in the description if watching this on YouTube and use code Ashley10 for 10% off your first purchase or 20% off your first subscription order plus free shipping. And enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Back to the show.
So let's define chronic cardio. This definition comes from Mark Sisson. He is the OG when it comes to metabolic flexibility and the right way of exercising for optimal health. And he says that chronic cardio is 45 minutes to 1 hour daily of 80 to 90% max heart rate. And remember, you can find your max heart rate by taking 220 and subtracting your age, and that gives you your max heart rate. So chronic cardio would be about 45 minutes to 1 hour of hitting 80 to 90% of that number. So if you're doing this math right now, you take 220, subtract your age, and then multiply it by 0.8 or 0.9, and that will give you the range for chronic cardio. Chronic cardio doesn't improve your metabolism. It doesn't improve speed or power. It doesn't improve strength. It actually causes some chronic damage to the joints because of overuse. And from that impact I talked about with the client I mentioned, it can actually impair your heart health because your heart does not enjoy being worked so hard every day. We can think about movement and the optimal movement for our bodies if we think of our ancestors. If you think way back in the caveman day and what we did to move, well, we hunted and gathered, so we walked a lot. We were pretty nomadic, so more walking. We would sprint. Maybe we would sprint away from the tiger, or we would sprint toward the buffalo. We would then lift heavy things, carrying the buffalo back to our community. We would lift our kids and water and all the things you can imagine we needed to lift to get by every day. But you really couldn't imagine us running for, say, 25, 26 miles just for fun. That wouldn't be something that we would do back in the day. So we walked a lot, we sprinted, and we lifted heavy things. And we need to take that idea into our current routine when we're looking at exercise for optimal health. When we go about and do too much cardio, it's actually inflammatory and it produces cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It causes systemic inflammation in the body, results in oxidative damage, and it really increases the speed of aging. That's why you can see a lot of long-distance ultra-endurance runners who look significantly older than they really are. More wrinkles you'll see on their face. In general, chronic cardio increases appetite. We end up eventually eating more than we burn, and so we don't see the weight loss that we would expect. It also hinders muscle growth, so when we see muscle mass decrease, we actually see a decrease in our resting metabolic rate. And remember that our resting metabolic rate is the number of calories that we burn doing nothing, and we want that metabolic rate to be as speedy as possible because that allows us to eat more and maintain this healthy weight. So even if you find a thin person doing cardio, it does not necessarily mean that this person is healthy. Oftentimes, these folks are skinny fat where they might look thin, but they've got more body fat than muscle mass, and it's still not a healthy body composition. There was a study looking at cortisol concentrations in the hair of endurance athletes versus controls, and they found that the athletes had significantly more cortisol. It was elevated, and they had an elevated exposure over a prolonged period of time as well. So this means that when we are performing this chronic cardio, we can expect to see increased cortisol levels, and I have an entire episode on this topic and the impact of cortisol and it promoting and supporting more belly fat growth, which is what most of us are trying to combat. So here are the things that I encourage you to stop doing and start doing from an exercise perspective to support your weight loss and your longevity. So stop always doing cardio as your form of exercise. So when you're going to the gym, just like I did when we were in Disneyland, you want to navigate yourself into the weights or the machines rather than on the cardio equipment. Stop thinking that you need to burn more calories and stop choosing exercise that blasts calories. Stop being obsessed with trackers. Stop thinking you can't lose weight if you don't do a ton of exercise because that's just not the case. Remember my client that I talked about in Durango. Stop thinking that you'll get fat if you change up your exercise routine to not include a ton of cardio. Stop your black and white thinking. This is what I hear from clients who come into PhD at the beginning of their journey. They say to me, if I can't exercise, I might as well eat whatever I want because I'm going to get fat no matter what. It's totally not true. We have a video on our website. Our website's myphdweightloss.com if you haven't checked it out. And there's a video of a lady who dropped significant weight in a wheelchair. We have another client who dropped over 60 pounds with cerebral palsy and cannot walk long distances. And I would tell you that video has encouraged so many people to get started and just get the job done. Actually, one of my clients who went on this podcast with me, Brian, said that that video motivated him. And as a result, he dropped 70 pounds and reversed his diabetes and his fatty liver disease. So if you can't exercise, you can still make huge improvements in your overall health. And the last thing I want you to stop doing is stop thinking you need to work out like you used to in your college days to maintain a healthy weight today. I hear a lot of men specifically come in and I ask them, what is that healthy ideal weight for you? And maybe here's an example. A client came in and he was weighing 250 and his optimal weight was 180. And I said, okay, what is that healthy weight for you? When did you look and feel your best? And he said, I looked and felt my best in my college days when I was 180, but I couldn't even imagine getting there. I think 220 is probably a good weight for me. And I said, well, why do you think that you can tolerate this toxic excess fat weight better when you're older than when you're younger? And he's like, yeah, that's a really good point. It's important to recognize that when we get older, we don't tolerate this toxic excess fat weight any better. So we do often find that ideal healthy weight might be the weight that we did weigh when we were in our college years. And the thing is a lot of men think, well, back then I was playing football or I was exercising a ton, and there's no way that I can exercise that amount and deal with my older, slower metabolism and get back to that 180 or that weight I weighed in my college days. But it's actually very true that you can get there. But what's not true is that you have to work out like that. You do not have to work out like crazy to maintain a healthy weight. You can drop weight and you can keep it off without a ton of this exercise and a ton of chronic cardio. Now, I'm not saying that you can be sedentary. Sedentary is not ideal. We were meant to move. We are a species that was meant to move, but there are better forms of movement than others. And now I want to dive into exactly what you can do to help you achieve this fat loss and keep the weight off for good. So number one is resistance training. That means lifting something heavy, not something heavy to where it injures you. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym and lifting weights if you don't like that. It can be body weight. It can be your dog's food. It can be whatever you want, but it's got to be something heavy so that it actually overloads the muscle fibers. In 2020, there was a systematic review of 22 studies that evaluated the impact of aerobic exercise, resistance exercise, so lifting something heavy, or the two combined. And they looked at the impact of these exercise routines on your metabolic rate. The results showed that the aerobic exercise and the combined, the aerobic and resistance, did not increase metabolic rate. What it did show is that the resistance training alone did increase metabolic rate. And that's because when you support your muscle mass, it actually is your metabolic currency. It's the marker for longevity. Our muscle mass burns more calories than our fat mass. So maintaining and actually enhancing your muscle mass is the key, especially as we age. And two very important things that are needed to support your muscle mass are, number one, overload and lifting something heavy, and number two, eating adequate protein. So remember, you want to aim for about 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound optimal weight. So if we go back to this fellow who came into PhD weighing 250 pounds, thinking that he needed to be 220, when reality says that 180 is that optimal weight where he fully collapses that belly fat, then he wants to eat about 165 to 180 grams of protein for the day. So number one is resistance training. Number two is high intensity interval training, and we refer to that often as HIIT. HIIT requires a really high heart rate. So an example of HIIT would be warming up for 5 minutes, going really, really hard for 30 seconds, and resting easy for a minute. Pushing really, really hard for 30 seconds, resting easy for a minute. And let's say you do 10 to 12 of those on, off repeats, and then you cool down for about 5 minutes. So the whole thing is 25 minutes long. It's short and sweet. It's really great because it's good for your blood glucose control. It's good for your heart health. I like it because it doesn't take very long. I would suggest that you trade out your long mile runs, that chronic cardio, and do a 20 to 25 minute session of HIIT. My favorite way to do it is on the bike, just because from dancing, my knees aren't great, but you can do it in any way. You can do it on the treadmill, you can run, you can swim, but it's the highs, the peaks, and the lows that really create the impact. Now, if you're doing this, you need to make sure that you really peak and that you really come down and rest. That's what I wasn't very good at the beginning because I just kept wanting to push. But if you just keep pushing the whole time, you're in chronic cardio. So you want to make sure you have those highs and lows. The cons about HIIT is that it can be a bit stressful. So if you are stressed out, you've got a lot of stress going on in your life, then you might not want to incorporate HIIT until that stuff calms down. So you want to do that about 1 to 2 times a week if you can. And I didn't mention, going back to the resistance training, about 3 times a week for lifting something heavy. And then if you just really love cardio, the second type of cardio that you could incorporate is called zone 2 training. This zone 2 is good because it doesn't require you to dig very deep. It's easy to recover from. It doesn't add more stress to an already overloaded system. So if you are stressed out and you want to get some cardio in, then you want to do this zone 2. It's good for beginners. If you don't have your nutrition, your sleep, your stress dialed in, then you want to consider zone 2 cardio over HIIT. And in order to do this zone 2 well, what you want to do is you want to find your max heart rate, and you want to do 70% of that max heart rate throughout the session. This way, the body can tap into the fat stores instead of the carbs for fuel, and it doesn't put stress on the body at this heart rate, but it does strengthen the cardiovascular system. In zone 2, you should be able to carry a conversation on easily with your friend, and you'd want that to last for about 30 to 45 minutes. But make sure you don't make that your priority. You're making resistance training your priority. If you want specific guidelines on exactly what type of exercise to do and when to do it throughout the week to drop fat and help with longevity, then go to YouTube and look in the description, and there's a link there with an exercise guide that will help you with your workout schedule for the week. Now, in summary, I want you to remember that your priorities are, number 1, every day, a 30-minute brisk walk. Not 5 days a week, but 7 days a week, a 30-minute brisk walk. Number 2 is resistance training. Remember, it doesn't matter what you're lifting, but you need to lift something that overloads the muscles. And then number 3, consider your 2 types of cardio, which would either be HIIT, that high-intensity interval training, or that zone 2 cardio. All right, you guys, I hope that this was helpful. Remember, you've got to step up to make the change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. I'll see you next time.